Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the annual President's Address at the National Academy of Sciences. This is when we celebrate the important initiatives that the Academy has undertaken over the past year, both at the National Academy of Sciences and at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine more broadly. Welcome to all of our guests who are arriving here through the live stream, and we look forward to telling you more about the Academy for those who are not so aware of it. I'm going to go through a year in review for you, but first I want to address what's the elephant in the room, and that is recent press coverage about gifts we received many years ago from the Sackler family for science meetings and a science prize. This was a period when the IOM was also conducting studies related to pain and opioids. I want to assure you all that at no time did the National Academy try to hide the fact that we had taken these funds. The gifts were disclosed in treasurer's reports, in press releases, on websites, on program names, and in the meeting proceedings. Most importantly, none of that Sackler work ever supported any work here on pain or opioids. When it became very clear in 2017 that this money was very tainted and we no longer wanted to be associated with the Sackler name, the council started pursuing many avenues for either returning, giving away, or repurposing those funds. Unfortunately, the donors refused to change the terms of the legally binding gift agreements. We ultimately convinced the donors to agree to freezing the funds so that we didn't have to publicly use the Sackler name or Sackler funds, and that was a stalemate that we announced in 2019. More recently, a legal solution is on the horizon. It appears promising, but it has been delayed for more than a year for understandable reasons. We've been listening intently to our members, our staff, our volunteers, and to our fellow citizens. During Tuesday's business meeting, I'll report in more detail to the Academy membership on why this problem has proven so difficult to solve and what we are doing to double down to get the job done. Specific actions that we're taking are engaging outside help on mechanisms for returning, passing on, or repurposing the donations. We know that universities have sometimes been successful in doing that, and we want to learn from them. We're also going to be engaging an outside advisor to examine our conflict of interest policies to ensure that our processes are effective and they're informed by best practice. The opioid epidemic has had lasting and real devastation on the American public and has touched many of us personally. We're committed to doing what we can through this process and through our work to help our nation address this crisis. And hopefully we can find a use for these funds once we are legally able to, which will also help address crises in America. So now, on to our important work. Do I have the clicker? Okay. Next slide, please. All right. So, as most of you know, the National Academy of Sciences, along with the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, issue a number of reports each year to advise the nation on important matters. Here I summarize our year in a few numbers, and these numbers are fairly typical, but maybe a slight tick up from what has been the situation in the past. If I could have the next slide, please. I'm just going to show some thumbnail sketches of a cross-section of a few of these reports. Obviously, with 96 consensus reports, I can't go through all of them, but I selected a couple that I thought would be of particular interest to the NAS audience. The one on the left is from our Division on Earth and Life Studies. they issued a very timely report in January of this year that examined the use of wastewater surveillance to track the spread and the prevalence of infectious diseases. This was much reported in the news as an early warning system, and it was ramped up during the pandemic. This report found that wastewater surveillance is useful for informing public health actions, such as masking guidelines and health resource allocations. Where are the hot spots? The report lays out a vision for an expansion of the national wastewater surveillance system for beyond the COVID-19 emergency. The report was favorably covered in 65 media outlets, including by our good friends at the New York Times and the New England Journal of Medicine. The sponsors have already begun implementing several of the report's recommendations, and a second follow-on report is underway. Now, the second report here, there's hardly a single one of us here in this room that hasn't had to encounter nursing home care as we make arrangements for our aging parents and eventually for ourselves. A report from the National Academies concludes that the manner in which the U.S. finances, delivers, and regulates this care in nursing homes is ineffective, inefficient, fragmented, and unsustainable. And as a result of this study, the John A. Hartford Foundation awarded a $1 million grant to Leading Edge with the aim of furthering the report's recommendations and putting them into action. In addition, several committee members testified to Congress about this report, and there's been direct engagement with several state health policy officials. The next one, of course, we also explore new frontiers in science, and high energy density science is where extreme conditions can literally change atomic structure and cause nuclear fusion. HED science has critical applications for society, everything from fusion energy to sustaining the nation's nuclear deterrent, while also contributing to broader scientific understanding, such as origins of the planets. This new report identifies key challenges and science questions for the coming decade, and it proposes some new ways to address them. In the fourth report, the NASM Committee on National Statistics, or CINSTAT, lays out a vision for a new data infrastructure for statistics and social and economic research into the 21st century. The report is the first of three that were funded by the National Science Foundation to explore the many issues surrounding data infrastructure. The report describes the need for a new national data infrastructure and describes its expected outcomes and key attributes. The report also discusses the implications of blending data from multiple sources, which, as you know, can violate privacy, as well as organizational implications of cross-sector data access and use. Now, the organization for this talk is in the main categories of our current strategic plan. And so today I'm going to focus mostly on the programs of activities of the NAS and how they contribute to our strategic plan. The first of three goals in the plan is to apply science for the benefit of humanity. If you click one more, you'll see the specific objectives under that. The specific objectives, if we could have the click one more time. Yeah, okay. The specific objectives are to catalyze action, to build communities across disciplines and cultures, and increase capacity in the U.S. and abroad. Next slide, please. There's likely no topic for which action is more needed than on climate change. I'm delighted to share that earlier this month, we launched a new initiative called the Climate Crossroads. It's a major effort to catalyze action on climate change. In early 2021, the National Academies President's Committee provided support for a 2-year campaign to develop a large, sustained, coordinated, and goal-oriented effort to address climate change. Solutions to climate change require input from across the academies, not just the environmental sciences, but health, engineering, and social sciences, just to name a few. The enthusiastic support from donors and sponsors and helpful input from many members who have been advising us on this during the development phase have culminated in our ability to launch this new effort. The Climate Crossroads will not create a new division within the Academy. Actually, what we want to do is cut down the silos that separate the science across the Academy. Its approach will be to facilitate and increase collaboration on climate work across our divisions, allowing the organization to chart new pathways for sustained national and global leadership over the coming decades. The Crossroads will provide high-level coordination for strategy to support existing activities across divisions and program units, and also bring in new funding for those efforts and new partners. Here I list a few of the inaugural activities of the Climate Crossroads. First, we've created an advisory committee to provide high-level guidance on emerging needs and opportunities for cross-academy climate-related activities. We're also launching a Legislative Fellows Program, which is a 9-month training and network experience for a bipartisan, bicameral cohort of legislative staff. We're going to be holding on July 11th and 12th a summer partners convening here at the NAS building. We'll bring together new and existing partners who are working with us to address the challenge of climate change. The Crossroads is organized on the lower panel there along 3 distinct pathways to action. These are coordinated, transdisciplinary, sustained, and action-oriented portfolios of National Academy's activities. This year, we'll start to engage across Academy's expertise to identify specific activities, and we'll also be looking at potential funding mechanisms to address these areas. The work will proceed in collaboration with the existing climate-relevant boards and committees across all the divisions. I urge you to visit the website to nominate yourself or your friends for the committee and to get more information about the partners convening. So the topic for which I hear the most interest and excitement and concern recently is the rapid development of AI. This slide shows a report released in 2022 which addresses ethical and societal impacts of climate research and resulting technology as first-order concerns of the research community. So this is a great example of the Academy stepping out to catalyze action on AI. The report advises the research community to proactively contribute to the benefit of society and identify and mitigate risks, to reshape research so that ethical and societal consequences are addressed from the start and throughout, develop expertise to integrate social and behavioral science and ethical thinking into AI research, and then to ensure that ethical and societal considerations are in the forefront before releasing artifacts or publishing results. Next, engage with the public and the public interest, help governments by revealing limitations of research results and identifying possible adverse impacts and needs for intervention, and finally, better prepare future industry professionals to address the ethical and social concerns. As a follow-on to that report, we've organized a cross-Academy's planning meeting to consider how to track and assess emerging capabilities, assess societal, ethical, and legal implications, and advise on responsible development, deployment, and use. Another program that is catalyzing action across the academies is our Gulf Research Program, which is now in its 10th year. The Gulf Research Program was created as part of the criminal settlements following the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The Academies established the GRP in 2013, and it is charged with deploying a $500 million wasting endowment from those penalties to support research and other activities that will reduce the risk of future harm to life, property, and the environment in the Gulf of Mexico and on the United States Outer Continental Shelf. This program will officially sunset in 2043. It's focusing its priorities on 3 themes, which you see here: offshore energy safety, the environment, and coastal change, health and resilience in the face of compounding disasters. The GRP program is the one academy program with significant flexible resources. It has the ability to take a long-range view, and it can pursue innovative approaches. Its portfolio includes traditional grants for basic research, large-scale support for multi-institutional programs, and capacity building, innovative competitions and challenges, targeted consensus studies, and investments in the young leaders of tomorrow in the Gulf region. So this is one of the reports that came out of the Gulf Research Program, and it's an example of a consensus study that was done in collaboration with the Academy's Transportation Research Board. It was released earlier this month, and it assesses the current level of systemic risk in offshore energy in the Gulf of Mexico. The GRP was created with the goal of ensuring that a tragedy like the Macondo blowout never happens again, and this study is a major contribution to that effort. Where do we stand now, and are we actually safer than we were then? It goes beyond simply assessing risk and offers a clear and tractable way for both industry and regulators to think about the concept of systemic risk throughout all the different components of offshore activity. It's a timely report that I hope will have long-term influence. Some of you will remember that in one of my monthly President columns, I put out a call for the membership to propose affinity groups. And affinity groups are aligned with our strategic plan because they build communities across disciplines and cultures. Right now, our structure in the Academy is very disciplinary oriented in our classes and sections. So the affinity groups would be informal associations of members from different disciplines, different sections, and different classes that focus on one single transdisciplinary issue. Council envisions these affinity groups as a way to build these communities to address the thorniest and most important challenges of our time. I'm happy to announce that the first affinity group on the topic of agriculture and climate change is off to an excellent start after they had their first workshop earlier this month. The organizers of this effort were Julie Bailey-Serras, Jeremy Jackson, Mary Power, and Sue Wessler. As you know, many of the impacts of climate change on food security and the natural environment are likely already irreversible. Most of these impacts severely threaten agricultural production. There is an urgent and immediate need for major investment by government and private sector foundations and industry to tackle this imminent challenge. The first workshop devised mechanisms to effect rapid change by identifying the most pressing challenges, coordinating with existing entities, and promoting education and communication to engage society, including farmers, in this problem with the goal of a more sustainable and resilient system. So the workshop, if I could have the next slide, not only provided the opportunity for scientists from different communities relevant to the impacts of climate change on agriculture to learn from each other's perspectives and expertise, but it also brought together key staff from the academies who are also supporting advisory work in this area. Most of you have heard about the Svalbard Doomsday Vault, which is an attempt to preserve seeds that represent the biodiversity of the planet in order to provide genetic insurance as climate change adversely impacts the productivity of today's monocultures. This timely report from the Division of Earth and Life Studies, released in January, examined the challenge of quickly reproducing enough of native seeds to restore ecosystems. It's one thing to have the seeds in a vault. It's another thing to have 1 million of them to be able to deploy out into severely impacted areas from, for example, wildfires or from human activities. Some of the challenges that limit this seed supply are that some of these plants are really difficult to grow. And the shortage of starter seeds from the desired species and locations is also a problem. The report calls for a coordinated interagency effort to support regional partnerships that can build a robust seed supply. I'm told that this month's National Native Seed Conference, where top officials from the Bureau of Land Management, the Fish and Wildlife Service, USDA, et cetera, come together, they're already discussing how to begin this interagency effort. So our report is already having impact. Next, another approach we have to building communities across disciplines and cultures is through the publications that the National Academy of Science issues. And one of the most powerful ways is to publish in journals that are not field-specific, so that the authors communicate to a broader audience, and a broader audience will see those papers. Here's the cover from a recent issue of PNAS, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. It's the cover photo of a juvenile female whale shark, and accompanies a paper by Freya C. Wormsley et al. That combines data sets from 348 satellite-tracked whale sharks and from the movements of large commercial vessels to estimate the risks of potentially lethal collisions of these whale sharks with ships. The authors found that marine traffic passed through 92% of the horizontal space used by these whale sharks, and that areas of high collision risk were correlated with reported whale shark mortalities from ship strikes. Depth recordings identified likely dead whale sharks in high traffic areas, suggesting that undocumented vehicle collisions may play a significant role in ongoing whale shark population decline and mortality. A special thanks to the many of you members who devote their efforts to editing PNAS. I figure that it touches, at some point in your career, more than half of the Academy members have been involved in PNAS. A new journal from the PNAS family, and I was thrilled to see how many of our new members are already familiar with this journal, is called Nexus, and it's even more broadly interdisciplinary than PNAS, as it covers topics across the disciplines of science, engineering, and medicine, with a special emphasis on the intersections of those different disciplines. It is fully open access, and it's off to a great start in year one. Thanks to all Academy members who supported this new journal with submissions, reviews, and editing. Now, our broadest effort to bridge disciplines and cultures is the cultural programs of the NAS. It encourages art to communicate science and science to inspire art. Cultural programs recently held an art science evening rendezvous on poetry, science, and society. It was held here at the NAS building. You can see scenes from this event on these slides, and I just wanted to quote one testimonial from Roland Hoffman. He said, "There was a special spirit in the room of people gathered to try to understand this world, to counter the pessimism that sometimes sweeps over us, and to partake of words that build worlds." So the last objective of that first goal is to increase capacity in the U.S. and abroad. This is hardly an issue, there is hardly an issue that we inform with science that hasn't already happened somewhere else in the world, is happening somewhere else in the world, or will soon happen somewhere else in the world. And that is why it is important for us to engage internationally. The US-UK Science Forum was established in 2008 to help the scientific leadership of the United Kingdom and the United States forge an enduring and productive partnership on pressing topics of worldwide scientific concern. These forums take place annually on topics selected by the officers of our Academy and the Royal Society, and the venue alternates between the two nations. Each is generally attended by 40 to 50 speakers and carefully curated participants, about half from each country in disciplines related to the topic area. This is an example of a program that used to be the Sackler US-UK Forum, because both the US and the UK found this series of meetings so important, we have dug deep and found funds to keep it going without having to use Sackler funds. The 2022 forum was dedicated to bringing nature into decision-making. That was the topic. The two-day event brought together representatives from academia, multilateral development banks, NGOs, national and international governance, and the private sector to discuss system-wide integration of biodiversity and nature's benefits to people into decision-making at all levels. The forum featured many high-level speakers, including the CEO of the Global Environment Facility, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez. He is depicted in this picture on the lower right. And also our 2022 Public Welfare Medalist, John Holdren, was involved. The full video recording of the forum is available on our website. We are already planning the 2023 forum. It's scheduled to take place in September of this year here at the NAS building in Washington, and it's dedicated to challenges and changes in research access to data. While attendance is by invitation only, it will be live streamed for anyone who's interested. As a second example of engaging internationally, on April 2019, the presidents of the NAS and the Israeli Academy of Sciences and Humanities signed a memorandum of understanding to benefit outstanding scientists in both countries and formalize cooperative relations between the communities here in the US and in Israel. Under the terms of the agreement, annual scientific conferences with the participation of leading scientists from both countries will take place alternatively in Israel and the United States. This accord provides for the first binational exchanges of eminent sciences and scholars from these two nations, and they'll hold meetings and conduct seminars at local academic institutions and also deliver public lectures. This was funded by a generous 5-year grant from the Blavatnik Family Foundation, as well as, and it supports this annual forum, as well as there is funding such that a senior researcher from one country can go visit the other country to promote collaboration and stimulate academic cooperation and understanding with a longer-term engagement. The forums are deliberately small, around 30 participants, to encourage dialogue and networking. The first Blavatnik Forum on computer science and its impact to our future took place September 2019 in Jerusalem. The second forum on strategies and technologies to combat antibiotic resistance was to have taken place in Washington on October 20th, but of course didn't. The 2023 forum will take place in Jerusalem again on November of this year and will be dedicated to alleviating global water scarcity, an issue that's strongly shared here in the US and in Israel as a problem we have to deal with. The video recordings of all forums to date are available on the website. Both the US and the UK, US-UK and the Blavatnik forums are organized with the help of steering committees that include NAS members, and we are really grateful to all of you who have volunteered your time to help organize these fabulous meetings. Okay, the Academy also seeks to build capacity at the nexus of science and public policy. Our main vehicle for that is here at the Academies, the Christine Mirzayan Science and Technology Policy Graduate Fellowship Program, a full-time, hands-on training and education program that allows early career individuals the opportunity to spend 12 weeks here at the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine to learn about science and technology policy, the role that scientists and engineers play in advising the nation. This Mirzayan Fellowship offers a unique opportunity to obtain the essential skills and knowledge needed to work in science policy at the federal, state, or even local levels. We are very grateful for the long-standing support of my predecessor's predecessor, Bruce Alberts, who has been very generous in keeping this program going. We also build capacity through the NAS Frontiers program. This brings together outstanding young scientists to discuss exciting advances in opportunities across the full range of disciplines we have here at the Academy. The format encourages both one-on-one conversations and informal group discussions in which participants continue to communicate about insights that they garnered from the formal presentations. It's a great place to feel the excitement of learning about cutting-edge research in other fields. By doing so, Frontiers helps to remove communication barriers between fields and encourages novel collaborations. The Kavli Foundation has generously supported about half of the costs of this program for many years, but that support is now sunsetting. Given the success of the program in breaking down disciplinary silos and identifying future leaders for eventual election to this academy, it was amazing to see how many of the new members are alums of the Kavli program. So we really want to keep this going and are actively seeking new sponsors. If anyone has good ideas, please send them our way. Now, I've talked a lot to you about the Ukrainian effort. For Ukraine, we're not only trying to increase science capacity, we're literally trying to save science capacity for a nation that is under severe distress. From the start of the war, the Academy was active in working with partners to help Ukrainian researchers at a time when their lives were literally in peril and national funds are diverted to the war effort. The program is organized around 3 pillars of people, policy, and partnerships. So on the people part of it, we have now raised sufficient funding to support 5 research teams for the next few years, and the teams have to include a Ukrainian scientist in Poland, a Ukrainian scientist still in Ukraine, and they can have other external collaborators as well. We received 170 applications for this program. Of the 170 applications, 40 were identified by peer reviewers as deserving of support and funding. Unfortunately, we only had enough money for 7 projects. However, I have talked to some of our previous donors, and they look interested in giving us additional funds so that we can extend our support to more teams. In terms of partnership, last June, the U.S. Academy's representatives, Polish and Ukrainian academies, convened presidents from a group of 8 other academies to develop a coordinated 10-point plan on rebuilding Ukraine's scientific community. We continue to work together with all of these academies to coordinate our efforts in Ukraine and advising our own governments. And just this last March, Von Tarikian, who many of you know, he's head of our Policy and Global Affairs Division here, visited Kiev with colleagues and representatives from the Polish Academy to develop better understanding of the situation on the ground. On May 10th, the Academy, together with the Simons Foundation, will be convening senior U.S. government representatives and foundation leadership to develop a clear plan for near and midterm support of the Ukrainian research community. So the last program I want to mention under this first goal is the New Voices program. It's our version of a young academy. These are the new voices here. I can't tell you, if you ever get a chance to go to a New Voices meeting, do it, because you come away with such an appreciation for their enthusiasm, their willingness to roll up their sleeves, do the hard work, and get involved. All these members are bright and completely engaged, and they're helping us to diversify our work to connect to their network of peers, introduce new ideas as to how to achieve our mission, and they represent young scientists from the U.S. in a multiple of international venues. So now let me move on to goal 2 of the plan, which is to improve public understanding and appreciation of science. Again, we have 3 objectives under this goal. If I could have the next click, yes. The 3 objectives are to reward science communication, promote understanding of science, and improve the portrayal of science in the media. So under the heading of rewarding science communication, yay, we actually got this done. We succeeded in securing an important gift from the Schmidt Foundation for awards for excellence in science communication. The beauty of this award is that it rewards both journalists who get the science right and scientists who get the communication right. So this is the award by the numbers. There were 24 winners out of 550 submissions of journalists and scientists. We've had many visitors to our webpage, and the group that we had here at the Academy to receive their awards was amazing. The winners were selected from an award pool. The winners received an award pool of $640,000. So these are serious awards. If you imagine you are a freelance journalist, this is a nice amount of money to get. We are open for new nominations right now, so be sure to nominate your colleagues or any journalists that you work with and are very pleased with. Here are a few comments from last year's event from the perspective of a winner on the top one, and from a sponsor who was writing to one of the winners, and the sponsor is, of course, Eric Schmidt. He wrote to Caitlin, of course, when I saw your award, I was impressed that the National Academies made the right decision on this, and I'm even more proud that we are the funders of this award. Congratulations, and please keep up the incredible work you're doing. It matters so much. Next up is promoting the understanding of science. We have several programs here that are doing a great job in this. I first want to mention the great team at LabX. Now, LabX used to be, it was our Koshland Science Museum that was over at the Keck building. And what we found was that foot traffic to Keck just wasn't enough to really have the impact we were hoping for. So we moved this program online a number of years ago. And they've been doing a number of rendezvous evenings, and they've been doing online events and fun discussions. And they released their first ever board game this year. It was created in collaboration with the Game Lab at Dartmouth, and it was inspired by the Academy's report on forensic science. The name of the game is called Glitch Squad, and it's a party game with a purpose, namely to educate audiences on the hierarchy of reliability in forensic evidence. LabX staff worked closely with NAS member Tom Albright, who was a key contributor to that Academy report, to ensure that the learning objectives were clear and accurate, while the designers at Dartmouth made sure the game was fun and engaging. It was funded by a Kickstarter campaign, and I was proud to be one of the contributors to it, and it's a great way to be kept up to date on what's going on here at the Academy, because when you're a Kickstarter contributor, they let you know all the updates. I hope that this board game, you'll all look it up and maybe use it for your next party gathering. Okay, next. There's widespread recognition of the importance of PNAS to the Academy, but some of you members may be unaware that we also publish a policy journal. The policy journal is called Issues in Science and Technology. It's a quarterly print and online journal, and it publishes opinion articles on science and technology. It's going to celebrate its 40th year of publication this fall, and we publish this in collaboration with Arizona State University and Michael Crow, and the team at ASU has really helped us up the impact of this journal. If I could have the next slide, we've had a number of interviews with Academy's of Academy's writers with famous scientists and science policy experts. That's being a big hit with the issue's audience. The current one this year features this year's Public Welfare Medal winner, Freeman Habrowski. And recently, Issues has published articles by the chair of the House Science Committee, Frank Lucas, officials at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, the GAO, NOAA, and NASA, among many others. Finally, Issues articles are frequently cited in the scientific literature. If I could have the next slide. In the U.S. and abroad. And, oh, I'm sorry, these are the interviews. Got ahead of myself. Okay, next one shows the impact. This just shows, since the 1990s, how much the impact has grown. And for a non-peer-reviewed journal to be cited this much is actually pretty impressive. Okay, another important upcoming event that promotes public understanding of science is next month's Nobel Prize Summit. The summit this time, this is the second in a series. The first one was on issues of climate change and technology innovation, et cetera. This one is focused on the problem of misinformation, although we decided to give it a more optimistic title, Truth, Trust, and Hope. This 3-day event is going to begin with a day of presentations by an all-star lineup of international leaders. The second day is devoted to the discussions of the problems and solutions among scientists to, reinforcing truth, establishing trust, and instilling hope. The third day is an outreach day, taking the top-line messages from the previous days out to the community, and we're doing that in partnership with informal educational institutions around the DC area. If we felt the NAS had convening power, or the Nobel Foundation has a certain cachet, you put those two brands together, and real magic happens. We're so pleased to be in partnership with the Nobel Foundation on this, and we urge you all to visit the Nobel Prize Summit website for more information. The Science and Entertainment Exchange, which many of you have heard me speak about before, is a long-running program begun by Ralph Cicerone here that works with Hollywood screenwriters to improve the portrayal of scientists in movies and on TV and help with more scientifically plausible plots. I know you all laugh. I know at least one of you has advised on one of these plots and then asked his name not be used. Okay, I'll just say that. Hollywood has largely returned to normal since the pandemic, and it means that the exchange consult load has similarly really ramped up. At the same time, we're also moving away from virtual events and returning to in-person events. That's what people want. And we're beginning with, we had a 2020 Writers Retreat in November. So these are just the sort of thumbnails of several movies and shows that were recently released or are coming out soon. Crater is a Disney movie. It's a coming-of-age story of an orphan boy growing up on a lunar mining colony. So Help Me Todd is a CBS series. In it, a meticulous attorney, Margaret Wright, hires her talented but scruffy son, Todd, as her law firm's in-house investigator. You might think, why is science involved in this? Well, the science issues involved in some of these pilots are Parkinson's disease, robotic surgery, and food chemistry. So if you're interested in any of those, you can see how they do it in So Help Me Todd. Next, NBC has hit the refresh button and brought back Quantum Leap. It was a popular time travel drama that aired 97 episodes between 1989 and 1993. This new sequel picks up 30 years after the original series ended. And Megan is a science fiction horror film. It was designed by Gemma, a brilliant roboticist. Megan is the product of this brilliant roboticist, and she creates Megan to be a friend, teacher, playmate, and protector until, of course, things go horribly wrong. Okay, so all of you Academy members who have served at one time on council probably fondly remember our wildly popular council talks, in which one member of council gets to stand up and tell you about their pathway. How did they become a scientist, and what motivated their science? Nearly all of these talks start with, "I was born." And so this is the name of a series that is being put together by the Science and Entertainment Exchange and LabX. It's going to be a mini documentary series that was directly inspired by these NAS Council talks. Episode 1 is going to feature our own Susan Wessler, and Episode 2, Tracy Drain, a mechanical engineer. A few years ago, we started recording all these talks, and my apologies to all council members who gave their talk before we thought, my God, we're just wasting all this effort by not recording it. And so I can personally attest to how inspirational these talks have been and look forward to sharing them more broadly. So I mentioned the Exchange's collaboration with Hollywood to improve the portrayal of science, and let me tell you, this is really catching on. 2 weeks ago, I had the thrill of attending the awarding of the Breakthrough Prizes in Hollywood. This was a star-studded event, about 50% Hollywood people, 50% scientists. One of the Hollywood people there was I'm not going to pronounce it right. Anyway, Wonder Woman. She's portrayed Wonder Woman and she was one of the dozens of luminaries there. And James Corden, who hosted the event, he said, "I'm now going to introduce Wonder Woman," but he was not referring to the film star. He made it clear that in his estimation, Wonder Woman is Catalin Carrico, who is there with Drew Weissman to share the prize in life sciences for their work on RNA vaccines. And now on to goal 3, improve the culture and practice of science. And here are the 3 objectives under that one. To set standards for professional conduct, promote excellence and diversity, transform thinking on the reward system in academia, and support the basic research enterprise in all of its dimensions. Now, one of the initiatives that came out of this was the Strategic Council for Research Excellence, Integrity, and Trust. This group is co-chaired by Franz Cordova, David Allison, and myself, and it addresses 2 of the objectives under this goal, both standards and the reward system. The committee has had a very active first year. It's working to align policies and incentives of funders, research institutions, and journals to produce trustworthy research. To date, we've established 7 working groups under the Strategic Council. They're taking on topics identified by members and from panel discussions with numerous experts. I am very pleased with the first year of this program and very grateful to the Moore Foundation for their support. So 2 of the working groups of the Strategic Council are already set to retire. We got some quick wins there. One is on leading a lab, which is to be a companion document to our booklet, a wildly popular booklet on being a scientist. And as you know, it's one thing to be a scientist working in a lab, and it's another to lead the lab in terms of your responsibilities. So we're putting out a handbook on that. There's going to be a summer workshop to scope that handbook. Also, we have an effort on trust in science, and this was led by Skip Lupia to review high-quality surveys to actually figure out, is there an erosion of trust in science or not? And very interesting results that came out of this. This is going to be submitted to a journal soon. Ongoing activities, harmonization of conflict of interest. We've got a pilot project underway to save time and improve disclosure. All of you fill out conflict of interest forms for your universities. You fill out conflict of interest forms whenever you are on a committee or when you work for the NAS. Many times we're asking people to provide the same information many times to different organizations. And we're trying to come up with a method to harmonize that in order to save you all time. Another activity is improving the retraction process, how to speed it up. Everyone agrees that university investigations to determine what happened and who's responsible are important, but they shouldn't hold up correcting the literature when we know that a study is flawed and it's likely to have impact on further work. And then finally, the third one I have up here is trustworthiness indicators. We've got a pilot on survey methodology that is based on a PNAS Nexus article that came out recently. So let me go on to what we've done here at the Academy in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. If I could, yeah, there we go. The Academy's DE&I office, under the leadership of Laura Castillo-Page, has issued a comprehensive 5-year plan that provides goals, objectives, and actions for advancing DEI and anti-racism at the National Academies, and it supports the larger strategic plan. The actions are grounded in evidence and best practices for advancing a DEI culture at our organization. And Laura's office helps us to prioritize and value DEI by building capacity throughout the entire organization while providing tools and resources. So Laura's been a great addition to our team here. One of the programs that has the most capacity and opportunity right now to advance DE&I is our Gulf Research Program. And the reason is the Gulf program has a focus on young people that is based on the recognition that a teenager today will be in their mid-30s when the Gulf program ends in 2043. We want to create young people to be in prime positions to be leaders when this program ends. And we want future leaders to be representative of the Gulf region as a whole. So the GRP is committed to embedding the principles of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in all that it does. For example, the Gulf Scholars Program is, am I on the right slide? Now go back, that's all right. There we go, perfect. All right, nope, back again. Yeah, there we go. There are currently 13 participating institutions with plans to see that number double after the initial pilot phase. Last month was the first in-person gathering of Gulf scholars, faculty, and administration in New Orleans. It was very inspiring and energizing for all attendees. Recognizing that the ongoing environment changes in the region require a rethinking of the built infrastructure and managed landscapes, the GRP has created a design studio, and that studio has courses at 5 institutions for undergraduate and graduate architectural students. It encourages them to engage directly with their local environment and address the long-term issues facing their community as they design for the future of the Gulf. Okay, if I could go on to the last objective under this goal is to support the basic research enterprise, and we want to stop that short of lobbying, but, and we don't lobby for science or for scientists in keeping with the NAS mission. But there's been much in the news over the last few years about Confucius Institutes on college campuses. More than 100 U.S. institutions of higher education at one time hosted a Confucius Institute. These are Chinese government funding language and cultural centers that first cropped up on campuses during the late 2000s and 2010s. They provide a source of funding and other resources that enabled U.S. colleges and universities to build capacity, offer supplemental programming, engage with the local community. But they represented a legitimate source of risk to host institutions with respect to academic freedom, freedom of expression, and even perhaps national security. By 2017, challenges in the U.S. relations with China led colleges and universities to reconsider whether they want to be hosting Confucius Institutes. Sustained interest by Congress and political pressure led numerous Confucius Institutes to close, especially following the passage of the fiscal year 2019 National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, which contained a provision that ultimately barred institutions receiving Department of Defense hosting a Confucius Institute from getting Department of Defense funding. While this provision allowed for a waiver process where a university could show that the Confucius Institute was not a threat to the DoD research, and several affected colleges actually applied for those waivers, the DoD did not issue a single waiver. Today, 5 Confucius Institutes remain on U.S. university and college campuses. This study from the National Academies that was released in January responded to a request from Congress to develop the waiver criteria for the Department of Defense to potentially permit the continued presence of these institutes. Receiving a waiver would allow an institution to have a Confucius Institute and still receive funding. On March 30th of 2023, DoD unveiled the Confucius Institute waiver program, and you can see there's almost a one-to-one relationship between what the Academy recommended and what the DoD is doing. We're always happy to see a timely consensus study that had immediate impact within 2 months. But unfortunately, not everyone is seeing this report in a positive light. Representative Jim Banks from Indiana blasted the guidance as the DoD, quote, bowing to the wishes of academia and the science community to continue their deep ties with China, despite the growing threat of the Chinese Central Party propaganda and espionage. So the work of the Confucius Institute Study Committee continues, and there's going to be a second report coming out now on foreign-funded language and cultural programs more broadly, and expect that out of June of this year. Here's a second example of how the academies are supporting the basic research enterprise. A topic that is on top of the minds of many university faculty is whether we will continue to be the nation of choice for attracting the best and brightest young scientists globally. These brilliant young people who come to the U.S. for college and graduate work are an important part of what has created the U.S. technological advantage. In this 2022 study, the academies warned that we can't be complacent that the U.S. will still be the country of choice for R&D going into the future. The report concluded that the benefits of openness outweigh the risks for most R&D efforts, that we must develop domestic talent while still attracting the best and brightest globally, and that we must move away from the past practice of listing a definite list of critical technologies, and instead we should move to a system based on coordinated risk management to include commercial as well as military applications. And finally, we need new approaches to protecting diffuse, multi-purpose platforms that consider security, integrity, interoperability, control, and user features. Related to the issues raised in the two reports I just mentioned, there's much concern within the academic community about the unwarranted attacks on scientists and public health professionals during the last pandemic. Last fall, the Academy's Committee on Human Rights held a 5-part series called Silencing Scientists and Healthcare Workers During the Pandemic. This was webcast to all and examined this global problem. On April 11th, CHR followed up with a webcast event to mark the launch of the webcast series Proceedings in Brief. This event explored practical steps that scientists, researchers, and health professionals are taking to protect themselves and their colleagues from being targets, including violence, harassment, and other completely unacceptable attacks. Okay, so now I'm just about done here, thank God. I'm sorry, this has gone longer than I expected. The current strategic plan for the Academy is becoming really dated. It was written in 2019, put out in 2020. It's supposed to sunset in 2025, but we've decided that now is probably a good time to refresh it so that my successor doesn't come in and find either a plan that's already outdated or a brand new plan that they don't agree with. So please drop me a note if you have suggestions for members to serve on this strategic planning committee. We want people who know the Academy well, but not so well that they can't think outside the box. Okay. And finally, as I end here, I want to give a thank you to all of you who volunteered for committees, reviews, awards, PNS, Nexus boards, and other activities, and also thank the non-member volunteers, the staff, and the sponsors for what has been a very busy but very successful year. So thank you all very much.